Hi
Hey everyone!
everybody. It's another episode of What We Read for this extremely long What We Read season. I'm gonna kick things off by talking about two books. First, we have An Enchantment of Ravens, which is by Margaret Rogerson. This is pretty recognizable to most people because it's been out for some time now. As you can tell, I have the paperback. This is about a girl named Isabel. She is a very talented portrait artist. It is actually considered her craft, which is like a thing only humans can do and that fae can't. And they live in a world where fae covet the craft, and so they come into town and like try to buy things. And one day, the Autumn Prince comes to Isabel to have his portrait done, and they sort of strike up a friendship and all of that, and then she sends off the portrait. Cool, done. Except that the portrait actually portrays him as having a human weakness, which is sorrow in his eyes. And so he goes back to Isabel, drags her off to the Feywilds because she needs to be put on trial for this, obviously. But then they end up on this kind of crazy adventure together, and things happen. The thing I like about this book is that a lot of the time it reminded me a little of how I felt when I was reading The Darkest Part of the Forest. There's a very strong like fairy tale sort of vibe to it. I liked being in the Feywilds. I liked the whole journey thing. I felt like the characters were a little bit half-baked, I guess, for me. Like they just didn't touch me emotionally the way that I like my characters to do. And I also felt like the pacing was a little bit weird because there's a lot of time jumping, but I ended up enjoying this one more than I expected to. I'd actually gone into it with very low expectations because I know a lot of people who didn't particularly love this story. It's sort of the way that I feel about fairy tales that I read when I was a kid. Like, I liked it. It was diverting and made me think up new ideas and new things. This is not necessarily a book that will stay with me forever. It is a book that I can say was definitely escapist for the time that we're currently in, so there's that. I'm a little lukewarm on this one, but I'm glad I finally read it. The second book I'm going to talk about is actually the second book in a companion novel series, and that is Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. I really enjoyed Vicious. I thought it was fun. It read like a sci-fi film, and that much is also true about Vengeful. Vengeful kind of brings back all of the old players in the first book, but there's also a new player in town named Marcella. She is hell-bent on pretty much grabbing all the power in the city of Merit for herself. It doesn't have the same sort of cat and mouse chase vibe that the first book has. Instead, it's sort of like a power struggle between a bunch of different characters, and that to me was interesting. I like seeing so many female characters with some sort of agency of their own. That was really nice. And I also like getting to see the characters in the first book kind of suffer the consequences of what went on in there, because that was also really interesting to read. I was very entertained. It could be a good movie is what I want to say, because it's so visual. Like the way everything is described is very visual. It was really fun. I am curious to see what happens in the third book because I've heard there's a third one. I'm like, I don't even know who it's going to be about anymore. Okay, I didn't know where she was going to take the second book after I'd finished the first one. I don't know where she's going to take the third book after finishing this one, but I enjoyed this one maybe a touch more than the first book just because I like the characters a little bit more in it. So I'd highly recommend checking that out if you haven't already. All right, your turn.
My turn.
I have heard from a little bird that we are going to be talking X-Men today.
That's right. This is going to be part one of my new X-Men reboot extravaganza, I want to say, because
Extravaganza. I feel like we need
I know there's got to be some kind of confetti of like mutant like genes and stuff like that. It's gonna be crazy. I want to start off with the book that sort of is the prelude to the actual reboot. First of all, it's called Dawn of X. That's where we are now, right? In the X-Men universe, which have gone through several big changes, all the way back to like X-Men, like the first X-Men issue 1, right? There've been a lot of like big major stories that have captured everybody. So this takes into consideration all of that history. Okay. Like it doesn't kind of do the whole DC thing where things happened and then things didn't. I mean, there's a retcon here or there, but sort of minorly, but not wholesale like DC goes, none of this happened and now here's a new Flash. It doesn't do that. However, it did do some crazy, insane stuff. Some of which I'm not too happy about. Actually, I can only name one or two things that I'm not too happy about, but everything else has just been amazing and great. So let's start with House of X and Powers of X, right? Basically, that's a prelude to the new normal. It explains how we got to the new normal, and it talks about how this entire time Moira McTaggart, spoilers, was apparently a mutant the whole time. For those of you who may have been following the X-Men, she was Professor Xavier's wife at one point in time, or lover. I forget if they were officially married, but they did have some kids, and that was a nightmare. But and the whole time everybody thought she was just like a human. That's it. Flat scan, no worries. But no, apparently Moira's mutant power was she can be reborn over and over again. At any point in time of her life, her naturally long life, she can die and then be reborn in the exact same moment in time that she was born as. Which is an insane kind of timey-wimey kind of Omega level power that I don't even, like, we have so many weird X-Men, it doesn't even matter anymore, right? So it explains in House of X and Powers of X that Moira apparently has been living several timelines. There was a timeline that she sided with Magneto and tried to wage a war against the universe, and that went to hell. And there was a time when she sided with Xavier, and that's the one that we're mostly popular with, and she ends up dying, and it didn't work too well either because whatever. And then there was a time when she sided with Apocalypse, and that didn't work out too well. This is the timeline right now. Dawn of X, House of X, Powers of X, all of that stuff, where Maury decides, I'm gonna tell Charles everything. I'm gonna tell Charles that, I'm gonna stop trying to make things work subtly. I'm gonna tell him this is all of the timelines, and in all the timelines we lose. Every single one of us. Nobody wins with their own thing, so we all have to do it together. And so you know what they do? They do exactly that. She puts all of her memories into Charles, all of the futures, the alternate realities, everything. Charles is like, oh my god, what are we gonna do? And then Charles talks to absolutely every mutant ever and says, yo, this is what it is. And Magneto's like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Like, I think we can do something about this. And they create their own nation. And it's great and it's lovely. And that is what House of X and Powers of X is. I highly recommend it because not only is it just a really great X-Men story, but it's told in 3 random timelines. Okay. There's 0 day, or rather, there's the past. There's the present when they're announcing we're going to rule the world now and be your benign overlords. And... because but by the way, the main thing is they have their own island. They create like these miracle drugs that only they can produce, and their, dole out to the humanity is treat us like a nation that is real, like a sovereign nation with all of the rules that apply to everybody, so we don't, just blow each other out of the water all the time, like most countries, economic sanctions, that kind of deal. And we will supply you with all of these miracle drugs that can cure Alzheimer's, cancer, all that kind of things, if you treat us like people.
Sure.
And eventually we'll take over the world. We'll buy you all out because we're so rich, because everyone's gonna want to live. Like, you win. You get to live happy, healthy, wonderful lives, but we also get to own everything eventually. So, where's your human pride? And then it's told in the future. Like the far, far future of how things just, again, go magnificently south. So even just that alone is such a beautiful, beautiful reason to pick up the book and just go. If you're an X-Men fan, I highly recommend it because for the first time we're winning. We're on the front. I say we like I'm a mutant, but for the first time we are. In your heart you are. I absolutely am. We are on the front foot this time. We are. You keep saying we. The mutants are all the X-Men fans. Everything that we know and love, it's given to us. Place of our own. Family relationships that actually work. Everyone is friends. I'm gonna stop there, but Dawn of X, and we'll talk about which big X-Men titles are, and the beauty of Dawn of X, and this is the intro, by the way, is after House of X and Powers of X, 6 new X-Men titles were launched, I want to say, in concurrent, and of course it's X-Men #1 this time, right? We've got Excalibur, we have Marauders, we have X-Force, New Mutants, and Fallen Angels. Now, we're going to talk about that in the next What We Read, because I sort of want to break down, well, what happens with those 6 major X titles and how nicely they wove those 6 titles into the Dawn of X series from 1 to 6, right? Collected. So it's literally every issue 1, every issue 2, every issue 3, 4, 5, and then 6. So you can enjoy it in silos, or you can enjoy it in chronological order. And I have, and it's great.
The last thing that I'm going to talk about in this video is actually something Mackie recommended that I read.
So happy that she's read it.
It is this graphic novel by Arnold Ara called The Mythology Class. It's pretty hefty. It's just one big collected edition. Yeah. It's a couple of volumes. I think it's like 4 volumes.
4 to 5, I think.
Yeah. Mythology Class is centered around this group of individuals, and one night they all have this dream. And in the dream, they are contacted by the spirit, and they just feel like there's a calling there. And the next day, they're all invited, or in some way they find out about this mythology class.
They're all college kids, by the way.
Yes, that is happening at their college, well, not their college campus, a college campus in the Philippines. And so they all show up for this mythology class, only to be told that they are the ones who are called to basically rid the Philippines of encantos in this time period, which are basically all the different kind of supernatural creatures that shouldn't
baddies,
be
ghoulies,
in this
that kind of
timeline.
deal.
And so they have to team up together in order to rid the world of that, only to discover that there's actually something bigger afoot that isn't necessarily their fault. It just so happens that the pieces are set into motion in their timeline, and so they also have to work together to fight against that. It's really fun. I will say right off the bat, there are definitely some comments and some parts that don't really age well. Like, yeah. they're just not great.
This was written like in the 90s or late 90s, 2000s.
It's a bit older. So there's definitely like, there's stuff about body weight, body image, not the greatest for sure. Even race a little bit in it, not the greatest. So I'm gonna just say that right off the bat.
Yeah, it is a product of its time.
Oh yeah, not to mention also like sort of like hitting and stuff like that, like abuse in different ways. There's a lot of that too. Anyway, But it's a really fun story. It's sort of like reading Percy Jackson, but for adults and with Filipino culture in it instead.
Yeah.
It's just like all of these people who did not know each other have a calling that's exactly the same, and so they have to work together and use all their skill set in order to beat the evil, and it's great. It's Mackie's favorite trope, basically, of like me and my friends save the world. It's fun too because it's set in the Philippines, so all of the stuff that they talk about, I'm just like, I've been there. I know that. Like, I understand that. And it's fun just to see like Philippine culture and history brought to life in this way, in like a very unique, sort of accessible way for most readers. I will say it reminds me a little of comics like Monstrous, where the text's a bit dense sometimes, because there's a lot of like explaining about what something means,
it's a
which
lot
is
of
fine.
exposition.
Like, I don't think that's too terrible a thing. At first I was kind of skeptical, and then later on I'm like, but then what happens? And then what happens? And it's well done. Like, it is a well-crafted story. It's very well paced. It is a huge cast of characters, but somehow he manages to make them all pretty memorable, at least in my opinion, because I was able to keep track of most of them, honestly. And, you know, you kind of get a crash course on like Philippine history and Philippine magic and Philippine lore. So it was really fun for that. There is a sequel, I want to say, right? There is a sequel that just recently came out, so I will also be reading that. If you're interested in reading this, I don't know that you would be able to access it in the United States.
I've tried. Amazon's still, like,
unfortunately, it's still out of print. But hopefully, maybe one day you guys can get your hands on it, especially because they just did a new anniversary edition, so maybe. I had a lot of fun reading it, honestly. Like, I kept like leaving the room and then coming back and being like, I have a comment about this person, or like I have something to say about this shit.
It was great.
Yeah, it's really solidly done, and it really holds up in terms of the story, I think. So, you know what else it would be great as? A film.
That's true.
I think it would be very entertaining.
Or a miniseries, right?
Like
Netflix should
maybe
pick
make
it
like
up,
episodic, like Big Baddie of the Week miniseries, because that would be so great.
Kind of true, yeah.
I do think though that the one thing I would have liked is maybe more, I guess. It's good for what it is in this particular format, and you get a lot of the detail in the image itself, not just the text. But it would have been fun too for this to be an actual novel, I think.
No, yeah,
because I feel like you would get to know the characters even better, and you would get to see more of their, you know, moments with one another.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was great. Really enjoyed it. Glad I finally read it. So that is the end of this week's What We Read video. We hope you enjoyed watching it, and if you have any thoughts on any of the books, please feel free to let us know. Again, we all hope that you are safe and well, and we will see you guys with a new video next week. Bye!